Okay, so I'd like to welcome back to the channel once again, Piet from Impact Shooting. Piet, how's it going?
Good.
Today, basically, we're going to be doing a Sika psychology video. Regular watchers of the channel will be kind of fairly familiar with the concepts we talk about, what the different kind of aspects of high performance psychology are. Piet, as a high precision shooter, obviously has a huge amount of kind of cognitive load, pressure, a huge amount of focus and concentration in certain aspects of his sport. And we're just going to delve into some of that today. Okay, Piet, what's the most important aspect in terms of the psychology of a high precision shooter, whether that's in competition or in a hunting environment?
Oh, that's a deep one. I guess the biggest thing is just to keep a level head. That you try and keep a sense of sort of awareness that you execute, because with sort of precision shooting, there's so many little things you have to tick the boxes of in order to execute a good shot, and that's just physically with like your body side touching the rifle. Then you've got the whole mental aspect, which I guess we'll get into just now, of sort of what you need to execute on in terms of your mental capacity to make sure that you've taken all the variables into account to put around on target. So I would say is to sort of to keep a level head in the sense that you're in control of everything, but not to be overwhelmed with sort of all the things we have to control when we're doing this.
Absolutely. So I think one of the interesting things there is like when you're trying to control those controllables, for lack of a better term, what's a common thing that might pop in? So if people aren't familiar with shooting, what would be a common thing that might throw you off kilter or throw you off balance?
Oh, dude, so this weekend we had a long range match, this past weekend, and my wife then was shooting with us in the match, and sort of my business partner's wife was also shooting, so it was so cool. My wife actually asked for a rifle afterwards, so
Nice.
it's going to get expensive. So one thing we were dealing with this weekend was a very switchy wind, and the wind was sort of coming from the front, and something we had to be super aware of while engaging the targets was taking account, like, okay, cool, so we're going to shoot, and then it's very important to note sort of how the plate moves. If you hit it on the right hand side, it's going to swing slightly to the right. If you hit it on the left, so it behaves differently. But what was really interesting this weekend is the wind would sort of blow from 12 o'clock, and then just the change from 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock, if you're shooting at 1,100 meters, it makes a massive difference. So we had to be cognizant the whole time of, okay, how does the wind actually feel on my face? And this is going to sound super funny, but I actually try and grow like a little, like a week-long beard for a match like that, because I find like I feel the little hairs moving, and then you go, okay, cool, I'm going to hold a little bit more wind for the second shot. And what is sometimes very difficult to deal with is you think you've done the right thing, or your first round, you're sending a round at a kilometer, and your first round hits in the middle of the plate. And then immediately you reload because you need to engage the target twice in this specific format. And your next round like sails by the left-hand side, and you're going like, I thought I did everything perfect. And then sometimes just the conditions change on you. And the challenge with the sport is not to let that kick you in the butt, just to sort of remain calm and focus on the next stage. Because as soon as you go like, I've just missed, quite an easy shot. Because generally it's the other way around. You would miss on your first shot, make a correction, and then re-engage the target. But if it's the other way around, you can sort of try, most people blame themselves. And with this specific format, the guys that generally win only miss about 3 to 5 rounds, and then you're going like, I've got 9 stages left, and I just like threw away a point, Then it's a slippery slope from there. So I try and focus always on just shooting one round. If I hit it or miss it, it really doesn't affect, or I try to not let affect my follow-up shot.
Okay, that's very interesting. Like, there's a saying we have like out in the woods if we're out hunting is, if you hear one shot, it's probably a good shot. It's probably a kill. Like if you hear 2 shots from somebody, it's probably at least 1 bad shot. And then if you hear 3, it's definitely 3 bad shots all in a row.
That's interesting, yeah. That makes complete sense, yeah.
In the case of, a shot goes awry, bad shot, you might see it splash in the dirt next to it. You might not see it. Obviously, you're very experienced at this point in your career. You've thousands and thousands of rounds gone through, right? And this is often the the issue with elite athletes is they might have done something a decade ago that fixed an issue for them, and now they're just like, no, that was never an issue.
Yeah.
Do you remember back to having to control those initial stages where a shot goes wrong and immediately it's effing and blinding in your head? Was there anything you used to do to calm down back then?
So it's very interesting that you mention, like you sort of, we forget sometimes where we come from. And I think that sort of comes with age too. We always, if I think about myself 5 years ago, I'm a complete idiot. In fact, if I think about 2 weeks ago, I'm a complete idiot. But that's part of being a human, I guess. But with regards to shooting, and something that's quite unique to me, is I've been videoing myself shooting since I started shooting. So I have so much data, and that's, I feel like, what was such a good tool for me to progress. And whether the guys are, whatever your hobby is, if there is a way where you can analyze sort of your performance after the fact, it's such a powerful tool. And I've preached about this on the YouTube channel a lot, is saying, guys, video yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone. Just watch it back and notice the little mistakes. I must say I've been really good with like never really losing my temper while actually shooting, because at the end of the day, this is still something I do for fun. As soon as you go, and I see other competitors, drop a shot and it's like, F this, F that, as they sort of stand up behind their rifle, and I'm going like, man, if I ever take it that seriously, then I need to find a new hobby, because I say hobby, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But with regards to sort of performance, man, if I watch myself shooting, like Piet shooting from 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I go like, wow, I was super, super green back then. Yeah. And I'll probably think the same thing if I come back in 5 years and watch my current version of myself shooting,
Yeah. And the opposite side of that is, if you do watch back from 5 years ago and you're like, geez, I was a lot better back then.
Yeah.
It's a terrible sign for what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It depends on your goals, 5 years ago, three years ago, I was super laser focused. I wanted to win every match I go to. Whereas now it's like kind of more focused on the business and the family aspect. I'm still very competitive. But, if I get second or whatever, as long as my performance is to the best of my ability and I don't make silly mistakes, then I'm happy. If somebody outperforms me that day, then that's wonderful. But for me, we spoke about this in the longer form podcast, like my goal is to clean a match, like basically not miss one round, and I've never been able to do that. So that's always the goal. Yeah. It doesn't really matter if somebody else wins on the day. It's as long as I perform to sort of my level that I hold myself, which is pretty high.
Yeah. Pete, that brings us on like swimmingly to the next point, and goal setting is something, like, having watched your channel a lot, having now spoken to you a fair bit, goal setting is something you're clearly highly invested in.
Yeah.
Right? And this is something that on this series of videos we talk about goal setting, trying to be smart with our goal setting. Can you talk about some of the, even not the specifics themselves, but maybe the process you go through when you're setting those goals?
Yeah, so I've actually planned a video to like sort of, I think it's very important when you set a goal to share that goal with other people, okay, so that you sort of hold yourself accountable. So I've shared that goal, or I'm planning on making a video to share sort of my 2022 goals with, the subscribers of the channel. And what I also like to do is reflect back on those goals, At the end of every year, I have a video that I do where we sort of look back at the last year that was. And it's very interesting to sort of see all the stuff you dealt with. But specifically with goal setting, it's important to have the goal be attainable, as we all know. It doesn't matter what I do, how good I am. I'm not going to be an NBA player, right? I'm just not tall enough. So it needs to be something realistic. And for me, my main goal is pretty much just to compete at the best level that I can. I don't have any specific things that I'm actually training for at the moment, which is sometimes a problem because you sort of get that goal delusion. I find if you have a really good event or a show or whatever you're sort of into, if you have that event to train for, it's much easier to stay motivated. And when you're out there and it's raining or it's 45 degrees Celsius outside and you're shooting, you're like, why am I doing this again? Oh, right, this is why. And then it's easier. I guess we have a goal now. Our sort of championship match is in January. I'm tied for first place on the log with one of my friends. And in fact, I'm actually wearing one of his shirts today. And
nice.
My goal is that, but again, more focused on the business at the moment. I've got more business goals and health goals.
Nice. Yeah, if anyone isn't aware of how insanely in shape Pete is, you can. I know your Instagram doesn't have any pictures,
I
but if you
solemnly,
watch the channel,
I'm planning on
yeah,
doing a video of sort of, I've documented the whole process of sort of my latest getting in shape, but so
sweet.
that'll be out in
As
the future.
as somebody who deals with a lot of athletes on a daily basis, and athletes that are of a fairly high level, I will say Pete's ability to change physique is right up there. So make sure you do go and subscribe. It's Impact Shooting is the YouTube. Okay, Pete. So that brings us on to kind of one of the more important aspects, or when I think about what will affect my shooting or what will affect the shooting of people around them, it's the kind of symptoms of stress, you know, and symptoms of stress, for me, when talking about them, will often fall into physiological symptoms of stress, whether that's increased heart rate, higher blood pressure, perspiration, possibly shaking. And then you have the psychological symptoms of stress, which might be lack of concentration, and all the other things that come along with it. Can you talk about those kind of symptoms of stress? What affects you more? What do you see affecting people when you're out on the range or out hunting?
For sure. So, did you do contact sports at school, by the way?
Yeah, I was forced out. I played 14 years of rugby.
Okay, so did I. And did you ever get, like, before a rugby game, you got like sort of those nervous jitters?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Absolutely.
once you tackle somebody, it's gone. Or once you hit the ground or you got the ball, the first time there's sort of some kind of contact, it's completely gone, and you focus on the game. So that is very much the case for us too as a shooter. Again, I think it's almost worse for us as a shooter because it's completely irrational, right? Most people, 99% of the people doing this are doing this for fun. They're spending their own money, they're paying for accommodation, they're taking a day from their family, and then they get nervous before the time. It almost makes no sense, but that is, I guess, sort of the expectation we place on ourselves. So if sort of some of my subscribers are watching this, and I'm obviously going to send them your way to consume this, you got to sort of keep that perspective. I'm doing this for fun, so putting unnecessary pressure on myself is going to hamper my performance, and it's probably going to lead to a less enjoyable experience. Having said that, we're human, okay, and that's sort of what we do. So for me to sort of simulate that first tackle or first time going to the ground with the ball, I run up and down, sort of at the back behind the cars, and I jack my heart rate up. This is like after we have sort of the match briefing, or I'll do, if there's no space to run around, I'll do like jumping jacks, and I'll really get my heart rate up. And then I'll give myself like 10-15 minutes afterwards, because we got to get to our first stage and all those kind of things. And I found that just that sort of initial sort of rush of blood through everything and oxygen and getting your sort of almost to a panting phase really goes a long way to helping me calm down. Having said that, some days it's worse than others, and we sort of, that manifests in shooting. We call them first stage jitters. Okay, as you put your rifle down and you're looking through your crosshair, everything is like bouncing around. You're unable to really hold your rifle still, and you know everything seems like it's happening at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You blink, and the RO says you're out of time on the stage, and like, you know, it's a lot. So in order to sort of get into the mindset where you can go into that first stage and be sort of calm and relaxed is a massive benefit, because a lot of guys, you know, you make a few silly mistakes there because there's like a little bit more going on. But then generally, after that, you know, you're good to go sort of for the rest of the day. On an emotional side, what I see the guys dealing with is, especially the sort of top guys that are sort of shooting for the championship, once they start missing, they sort of start getting in their own head, and as soon as you start tracking what sort of your competitors' scores are for the day, it sort of has this, you know, this guy's here, I'm here, I shouldn't be missing anymore, but because you're focused on that, you're not focusing on what you need to be focusing on. And then that's also a recipe for disaster. So what I try and do is I don't focus on what anybody else is doing. I'm focused on what I'm doing, and you know, if so-and-so is X amount of rounds down, or they're not no rounds down, I like try and almost not, I don't actually want that information, to be quite honest. So I'll never go around asking like, hey, how's this guy doing, you know? Yeah.
No, it's really interesting you say that about that kind of like reset of you miss a round, you just reset and go. Like I remember 2 or 3 years ago speaking to a rugby player in a clinical setting, professional rugby player, and he was talking about he played full back and he'd try and take a ball, he might knock the ball on, or he might make the wrong decision, he might kick the ball out on the full. And he was saying something they actively worked on was picking a point in the crowd, and you just stare at that point for 3 or 5 seconds. That acts as your reset.
Okay.
And he said he found even after retiring from rugby, that reset then became something he used on a daily basis. Like if he's in a job interview and things are going wrong, take the reset 3, 4, 5 seconds and go again.
Okay.
And you could see it even talking to him. It's funny how that pops up in your sport, which is very, very precise. Like it's very intense at some point, but then it's incredibly precise, incredibly fine motor skills.
Yeah.
And then on the opposite side of that, you have somebody running into a brick wall and breaking themselves.
Yeah. So what's very interesting with our sport is most people always, when I'm finished shooting a stage, they'll say, "Dude, you shoot so fast." Because if let's say, for example, some of your viewers haven't listened to our other podcasts, sometimes we're challenged with, 6 to 8 positions, sometimes it's 4, and we have to engage multiple targets from multiple positions in about 90 seconds. Now, if you have a plan to do this, it's quite simple, actually. And most people, when I sort of come off the stage, they go, "How do you do it so fast?" So if you're in sort of the mental space, where everything is calm, it's quite easy to do. And this is the thing where sort of, what we spoke about earlier. If I look at myself shooting 5 years ago, it seems like I'm in a rush the whole time. It looks like I'm trying to go fast because I'm trying to complete all the tasks that I need to do on the stage. Whereas if I look at myself shooting now, it's slow. It looks slow, but it's sort of like that old saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? But everything's methodical. Everything's got a plan. I have my little shot sequence that I go through, execute the shot, next shot, move. And at the end, I come off the stage with like 20 seconds left, and the guys are going like, "How are you doing that?" But it's just super laser focused and being in the right headspace, where even if when I'm in the right headspace, which I always try and be when I'm competing, if I have for whatever reason an issue with my equipment, I've kind of bought myself that time because I've been slow and methodical, and I can quickly diagnose what the problem is, fix that, get back on target. It's such an advantage to be sort of in the right mental space, and that's what's very fascinating about this conversation. And I've always been intrigued by people that perform at the highest levels like that. Like one of my shooting idols is a gentleman called Jerry Michalak, multiple time world champion. He's like, I don't know, probably in his 60s, and he's smoking guys that are 22 years old, and he's been doing that for like 3 decades. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Jerry is almost not human with the speed that he if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't seen Jerry Michalak, he has thousands of YouTube videos, about him. That is, when you look at that, that's a different thing. Like that is, for most people, that's something you can't even comprehend the speed they move through. Pete, one thing you mentioned there, and just before we move on from this, is you said you have your shot sequence or like a pre-performance routine. Is that something that's like verbalized in your head, or is it something now that's completely autonomic?
It's like a unconscious competence. I've done it thousands and thousands of times, so I know exactly what sort of sequence I do what in, and it's not something that I'm thinking about. And that's what's the really cool thing about training yourself to such a level, is because you're not thinking about all the little things that you were doing 5 years ago when I started. It frees up mental capacity to think, okay, what's the wind doing? Is the wind switching on me? Is this working? I can do more mentally because I'm not consuming those resources to try and manage all the little things.
Yeah, that really is the sign of like a really experienced practitioner, that just the automatic nature of everything that's happening.
It's weird. One thing to add to that, sorry.
Yeah.
It took a while to get to sort of that level, but it was literally almost like, and I've had friends experience the same thing. My friend Skulk has recently started winning matches too, and he's progressed such a long way. And it's literally like I was struggling, and it was like the penny dropped, and I was like, oh, this is how it works. And it was unreal. It was like I know where it happened. I could finger point to that moment. It was so cool. It wasn't like a gradual thing, which was I found quite interesting.
And Pete, what did that transition look like? Like when you said the penny dropped, was it suddenly just things happened without you having to try for them to happen?
Yeah, pretty much. I was shooting a match, and I rocked up there. I'd done a lot of training on sort of stuff that I was struggling with. What's cool about our sport is they give you a little matchbook, and I keep notes in that matchbook, and I knew what sort of my tendencies were, and I went to work on those. And then I worked hard on them, and then that match I won. Like I think it was one of the probably the biggest winning margin we've ever had in the country. It was literally just everything clicked, and I was like on autopilot, and nobody could beat me. It was so cool.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Okay, Pete, the last thing, and this is just, I think this is more interesting for me than anything, right? If I look at what you do, I'd probably put it into like three different tiers of your first tier would be competing in precision shooting. Your next tier would be hunting in a wild environment. And then the third thing would be like target shooting, training yourself to get better. Could you just talk about maybe like the psychological differences between those, where one you might have a very high like arena of consequence in hunting if something is going to be wounded or not. In the competition, obviously you'll have your competition anxiety. Do those things look the same, or do they feel the same to you, or what are the kind of main differences?
It's interesting because, I sort of try and tackle, and this is the power of repetition. So every time I go behind my rifle to take a shot, I try and follow the same shot sequence. Obviously, there's a lot more going on when you're shooting something that's breathing, okay, if you're harvesting an animal. So I have that respect, and I don't want to shoot an animal at a kilometer, for example, because if I miss a steel plate at a kilometer, I can just shoot it again, or I get no points. But if I shoot, a big bull in the stomach at a kilometer, everything can be perfect. My wind call can be perfect, my rifle, everything can be perfect. But that bullet's going to take about a second and a half to get there. And in that second and a half, if that animal gives one step, which is completely out of your control, you're wounding it. So sort of that side, I limit myself before I go hunting. Like this is sort of my maximum range where my bullet gets there almost instantly. But from a shot process point of view, it's quite interesting you asked that, because when I'm aiming, and I'm aiming on like a kudu's head or a springbok's head, my shot process and my level of anxiety is non-existent. Or my shot process is there, but the anxiety is non-existent. It's literally as if I'm shooting a target, but I know that it's going to be a 100% banker when I'm hunting. Sometimes with target shooting, you sort of hit, I need to move on, so I kind of hope this is good enough, and you'll send one. Obviously, I'll never do that with hunting.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Like even you're shooting the same setup, you're shooting probably with the same support bag or the same tripod, but it is a different kind of processing of information that goes on in your head.
Yeah, it's just people need to be aware of the consequences. And just because you're a really good shooter and you can shoot a target at a mile, doesn't mean you have to go looking for that, or even if that's what you're presented with. I have a friend who says every day can be a hunting day, but every day is not necessarily a shooting day. So you must be content with the fact that you're probably going to go home empty-handed, if the right set of circumstances don't present themselves. And I think it's very important that you don't force something. As for the same reason, you shouldn't be deadlifting, 180 kilograms if you can't. Something's going to go wrong. Don't do it.
Yeah, no, I think that every day being a hunting day, but every day not being a shooting day is a really great saying. Okay, very last thing, Pete, and then we'll wrap you up and let you get back to trying to dominate precision shooting in the world. You recently have talked about bow hunting becoming a thing for you and trying to get into bow hunting. Could you talk about, do you feel there's a lot of transfer with your obviously very high level of proficiency with a rifle? Does that transfer across, or have you found new kind of like learning challenges with the bow?
So I would say the rifle shooting is not difficult. Okay, if you're very new, then yes, it is difficult. But if you're sort of, for example, my wife came with us to shoot this weekend's match. She beat me in the match because I was giving her wind calls and dialing her elevation and doing sort of all the math for her. But she ended up beating me in the match. So it's not that difficult to engage steel at a long range. What does translate, obviously, is your sort of respect for the animal. Now, with the bow, it's not very forgiving. So I've been hesitant to hunt with it to date because I haven't been putting in the time to shoot the bow as much as I need to, because I'm focused on sort of the rifle stuff. But I'm very curious as to that hunting experience, and it's something that I definitely want to pursue next year. So I also, funny story, I was cleaning some hard drive space and I found a video of the day that I purchased my bow in Oklahoma, and I was in the bow shop and my friend took a video, and my very first shot of the bow I hit like in the center of the thing over like a 40 yards thing. So I guess some things do translate, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is a very much a perishable skill. So if you don't stay sharp, it's going to go away much quicker than, you know, shooting an animal at 100 meters with a sighted in rifle. Like literally, it's not difficult.
Yeah,
the difficulty is getting
absolutely.
to within 100 meters, but after that, it's pretty simple. Now, obviously, the challenge of the bow is sort of that stalking element and all of those things that go with it, and that actually intrigues me, because the more difficult something is, the more into it I am, I guess.
Yeah, I think the more difficult, the more addictive as well.
I watched a
Yeah.
climbing documentary on Netflix last night called 14 Peaks, and I'm going like, man, I really shouldn't get into mountaineering because this is going to end badly.
Yeah, definitely there's the challenge aspect for a certain personality type. An insane challenge is like just the right amount of challenge for you to be interested in it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Pete. Pete, in terms of people, if they want to hear more from you, if they want to get more of this kind of information, if they're just interested in shooting, where should they go?
YouTube's best, probably Impact Shooting. I'm also on Instagram, Impact Shooting without the G on the end, because some other guy has that.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, Pete.
Awesome,
And
man.
we'll hopefully chat again soon.
Absolute pleasure. Bye.
Thanks.